Congressman LaTourette, thanks for joining us this week.
Sure.
So it's been an interesting couple of weeks, to say the least, here in D.C. I feel like we've kind of been on this roller coaster since obviously Speaker Boehner announced that he was stepping down as Speaker and resigning his seat in Congress. It looked like Kevin McCarthy was going to be the next Speaker. Everybody got together to have the election of Kevin McCarthy, and they came out and said Kevin McCarthy had decided he wasn't running for Speaker. And then we spent a week or 10 days with people trying to convince Paul Ryan to run for Speaker. And then he met with folks and said, I'd run, but under certain conditions. And today, just before we started filming, the House actually finally elected Paul Ryan, the next Speaker of the House. Talk to us a little bit about this process, what it's been like, and also, what is the future for Congress now under a Speaker Ryan?
Well, both good questions. The first is, what was occurring was this group of 40 to 50, I guess it's 43 based upon a vote that took place the other day. Republican members who call themselves the Freedom Caucus had been really standing in the way of legislation that Speaker Boehner wanted to move forward. And he, in his mind, became the issue, and he announced his resignation. The difficulty was that once they sort of achieved this result, they didn't have a plan. I mean, there was nobody that was waiting in the wings, if you will. I mean, McCarthy was there as the majority leader. I suppose they could have lived with him, but they didn't seem to be really crazy about, just shuffling the deck chairs around. But McCarthy, at 9 o'clock on the morning of the vote, he went in, he's ready to go and ready to get the votes. And at noon, he appeared before the cameras and his colleagues and said he just couldn't do it and wasn't going to do it. And in talking to people on the Hill, basically his concern was he would have won going away in the Republican conference, but he wouldn't have gotten 218 votes on the House floor, which is what occurred today with Paul Ryan. And Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, the Ways and Means, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, formerly the chairman of the Budget Committee, the party's vice presidential candidate in the last election with Mitt Romney, is well respected by all stripes of Republicans in the House. And basically there was a big push. A lot of people called him. He is reluctant to give up time with his family in Wisconsin on the weekends. He also didn't want the kind of disruptive behavior that led to John Boehner deciding to retire. And so he made that pretty clear. To be seen, because there are a lot of different stories, and some people are saying that he's already caved into some of these demands that they've made about the steering committee and committee assignments and things like that. Others are saying, oh no, he's not making any deals with them at all. But I was in the Capitol about an hour ago during the election, and unlike opening day of this Congress, when 25 Republicans walked away from John Boehner and voted for somebody else, you only had 6, I believe, do that this time, and obviously all the Democrats voted for Nancy Pelosi, except for a couple. I heard somebody voted for John Lewis of Georgia. I did hear a Democrat do that. But Paul Ryan, and he's promised that we're going to turn the page and that it's going to be a new day. And my sense is he'll get a honeymoon period here for a short period of time. But what the wild card is that if he makes decisions that this group doesn't like, what are they going to do about it? And then what's he going to do about it? And I don't see a ton changing. And I would tell you, in talking to a lot of my former colleagues this morning after the vote, they're not optimistic. I mean, they're happy with the selection of Paul Ryan, but they're not optimistic that things are going to move forward in a way that shows that the government is functioning and the House of Representatives is governing.
Well, you served with Paul Ryan. Obviously, you served with and under Speaker Boehner. You know both of them. Stylistically, how different are the two men?
Well, John Boehner of Ohio, I mean, famous story, he grew up in a bar. His dad owned a bar, and he swept the floors, and he has a lot of brothers and sisters. And he's really very much a guy's guy, a backslapping, golf playing, cigarette smoking, wine drinking guy that wants to be everybody's buddy. Paul Ryan, on the other hand, his reputation and just in serving with him since he got to the House, is a wonky guy who is in the weeds on the numbers, and that's why he was tapped to produce budgets. And very close to his family. Both men are Catholic, and he doesn't have the deep, broad friendships that that Boehner does across the conference. He has some very, very good friends, obviously. But as I mentioned before, maybe in this instance, it's not so important as to how many friends you have, it's how much respect you have from the people in the conference. And at this moment in time, he has a great deal, reservoir of respect from, again, centrist Republicans and very conservative Republicans.
Well, Speaker Boehner did a couple of pretty big favors to Paul Ryan before he left. I want to start first with the budget deal. Speaker Boehner had said he'd like to clean out the proverbial barn before he left, and I think there were a lot of people, myself included, who thought, you might like to do that, but that seems like an awful lot to get done. And by God, he managed to strike a deal with the Senate, with House and Senate Democrats, with the Obama White House on a budget deal, 2-year budget deal that will avoid a government shutdown, raise the debt ceiling, and finally gets a deal with Democrats over spending caps.
Right.
Pretty tremendous accomplishment, and really leaves a lot of these thorny issues no longer on the plate for Paul Ryan. What do you think, one, what does that say about Speaker Boehner, is that he was able to actually get this done, the impossible on the way out? And two, what does it mean for Paul Ryan to start with this clean plate?
Well, I think it's great news for Paul Ryan because, as you mentioned, the debt ceiling debate is one that threatened to shut down the government in the past and probably would have again. Spending bills have always been problematic, and this bill puts more money both into domestic programs but also defense spending, which is very important to Republicans, and quite frankly, the president, President Obama, said he wasn't going to negotiate on the debt ceiling. Well, he did, and so this is really the product of both sides doing what the government's supposed to do, and that is finding common ground to move forward. It's interesting too. When I was just over at the Capitol this morning for Paul Ryan's election, a number of my colleagues were saying that they didn't know that these budget discussions were going on. And when they heard a few of the details leaking out, they didn't believe it. I mean, they didn't believe that this was achievable, and they were obviously pleasantly surprised. And so, a reporter asked me yesterday, said, "What do you think John Boehner's best accomplishment was?" And I said, "I think this past week was the best week of his 5-year speakership, because he finally basically said to these guys who have been nothing but thorns in his side, well, we're going to get this done. And we're not going to have the Republican Party in the House caught behind an 8-ball. And so the beauty of the debt ceiling thing is it takes it beyond the next presidential election. And it also solves this rather tricky issue on the budget. And it does give some relief, which the Democrats are happy about in terms of additional spending on the domestic side. But, there are a couple of things in here that senior citizens who are on Medicare were facing a 54% increase in the premiums on Medicare Part B. That unprecedented, and clearly in the same time when Social Security is not going to be increased, the cost of living adjustment, it was announced it's going to be the first, I guess only like the third time in 50 years or something, that there's not going to be a COLA increase. And then to put on this 54% increase in premiums on Part B, that was not good, and a lot of members on both sides of the aisle would have heard from the seniors in their district, and so that's in there. As I indicated before as well, there is increased defense spending, and the president had to swallow that. He didn't want the additional defense spending, but it was very important to the Republicans that the men and women who are serving be well taken care of with the best equipment possible, and so that's in there. So this is a big deal. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment. It's a gift to Paul Ryan, and I would argue it's a gift to the country and especially the Republican Congress, who now will not find themselves hoisted on their own petard going into the election year.
And the final issue I want to talk about, the other gift that Paul Ryan got, is one that, at one point this was an issue, the Export-Import Bank. It was completely non-controversial, was overwhelmingly bipartisan, turned into the cause célèbre for conservatives in Washington. It has been an issue on almost every other unrelated vote. There's been some demand that either XM be included or that there be some guarantee that it'll never be included. It's just been unbelievable. And we saw a very rarely used procedure, parliamentary procedure, a discharge petition, where 218 members of the House signed a discharge petition that brought the bill out of committee and directly to the floor. And there was a lot of talk about how, majority of Republicans weren't for Export-Import Bank. Well, by God, when we actually had the vote on final passage, it was overwhelming, and it included a majority of the Republican conference. 127 Republicans voted for final passage.
Yep.
What does this say about the state of the Republican Party, and what does it say about what we can expect from centrist Republicans going forward? Are we going to see more moments like this where they say, "You want to know what? I'm tired of being held hostage"?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, there are more centrists than there are of this Freedom Caucus group. There's about 70 centrists and 43 of these very conservative folks. And basically, the governing wing of the Republican Party did stand up and say, we've had enough. And you're exactly right. The Export-Import Bank has been sort of a pro-business vote in the past. The Chamber of Commerce was all on board, and some of the bigger companies across the country that use the Export-Import Bank to create sales and facilitate sales overseas were all on board, and were kind of upset when it became this political football. But it did, as you say, it became a cause celeb. And this week's activity is an embarrassment to a fellow by the name of Jeb Hensarling, who is the fellow from Texas, the Republican, who is the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. He basically was the one that said, we're not doing this, come hell or high water, and we're not going to reauthorize this, and fought it to the point where the charter expired. And that's where they wanted to leave things. And so this week again, Boehner said, no, there's widespread support for this, and we're going to let the House work its will. But the embarrassing part for Hensarling is, again, all during this debate, he'd been saying, well, most Republicans are against this, and if there's ever a vote, which we don't want to have, that will bear that out, and you're going to pass it with a few Republicans and overwhelming Democratic support. That didn't happen, as you point out. A majority of the majority, this so-called Hastert rule of the Republican conference, voted to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank, and that I think sort of stubbed the toe of these arch-conservative folks. It was a win for the centrist party, the centrist part of the Republican conference that really just wants to get things done, and it's kind of ironic that excuse me, the same bunch that is out there saying, well, it has to be a majority of the majority. There's only 43 of them, and these 43 out of 247 are demanding rules changes, and they're demanding that they be on certain committees, and they're stopping legislation, and so apparently a majority of the majority only works in certain situations, and that sort of non sequitur is not lost on these centrists, and they say if they were consistent, and they said, well, it's always has to be what the majority wants. People understand that, but you can't sort of cherry pick the thing. So. Again, this was there's a column here in the Washington Post every week called "The Worst Week in Washington," and they also talk about who had the best week. And John Boehner had the best week in Washington this week, in that he not only was able to get significant legislation through, he was able to hand off the speaker's gavel, the worst job in Washington, and he's going to be in Florida soon with his wife playing golf.
That certainly sounds a lot better than being speaker.
It does.
Congressman LaTourette, thanks for joining us this week.
Good to be with you.